Joël, the floor is yours, and you don't need any introduction. Your father was the first generation farmer in Shenandoah Valley. And Shenandoah was, it was a wrecked soil, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was, is this working? Yeah, this is working.
This one is working.
This one is working. I'm so mic'd up. I've got translations. I feel like a televangelist. Though, like woo. Yes, it was very worn out.
Okay.
Yeah.
The floor is yours. You make your presentation. What do you think about this cow, Joël? It's a Frisian Holstein.
Yeah, she's not very friendly. When you go up to her and pet her, she doesn't turn her head. You know, she's supposed to turn her head. I like live cows. Live cows are better. Listen, I've got to figure out how to move this thing. I'm a Luddite, so we have. Good. We'll pull. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Good. Good. There we are. All right. Yeah. Thank you. We're all set. Before I show pictures, I'd like to. It's an honor to be here. It's.
I forgot something. Sorry. U kunt vragen stellen, zowel vanuit de zaal als via de livestream, via de site slido.com. Dus slido.com. En dan logt u in met de code. Zo'n dingetje, hashtag zeggen we tegenwoordig op Twitter, 3413. Dus slido.com. Zo'n dingetje, hashtag 3413.
Great. All right. All the preliminaries are out of the way. The cow, Dick, are all set. Okay. All right. It's a real pleasure to be with you, and a real honor to be here and to be a guest here. Believe me when I say that I am not here to disparage or talk down in any way, because trust me, everything that I say here, I've said in the U.S. We have the same problems, perhaps not as acute, just because we have a little more land, and so there's a little more forgiveness there, because we can just, we have more other places to go. You're running out of other places. As Bill McKibben says, there is no over there. Over there is in somebody else's backyard, right? And so. So we have that, but the remarks that I make today are just as appropriate in America as they are here. And so trust me, I can make everybody mad. I can make all the Americans mad, all the Netherlanders mad. I can make everybody angry. So I'm a non-discriminatory anger person. I'd like to start by developing a bit of a context. You see, all of us live in a point of time, and we all tend to be fairly myopic. All right, we think that what is, well, it's always been. We've always had cell phones and laptop computers and video games and live streaming and universities with nice big, theaters in them. And what's amazing is how many things that our predecessors, people who came before us, in their time thought the same thing, that the way things are, the way we think, the way it is the way it is. And, there was a time when everybody thought the earth was flat, right? And if you went out too far on the ocean, you fell off the edge. And now we laugh at them for thinking the earth was flat. But if we went to them in their time and said the earth is not flat, what do you mean the earth is not flat? Of course it's flat. You can't. It's just flat out there. And of course, you know, in the Netherlands, it's really flat. All right. But it's flat out there. And of course, the sun comes around the earth, because the earth, we're sitting here and you watch the sun come up and it goes over, and of course the sun comes around the earth. You know, these were paradigms, these were worldview mindsets, axioms, principles. Nobody questioned this, and if you did dare to question it, you were a heretic. You know, they put you on the rack and pull him apart. Death and disease. You know, death and disease are from spirits, and many of you, I'm sure, have seen woodcuts, medieval woodcuts of the spirit of flu, the spirit of measles, the spirit of whooping cough, you know, and they're all pictured in their little, you know, ancient pictures. The bubonic plague, you know, was spirits. And you know, if you had said to them, no, dude, it's the mice coming into the thatch of your house from the ships coming from Paris, no, that couldn't be, you know. There was a time when slavery was presumed to be fine. If you dared to mention, you know, slavery may not be a very good institution, why, you would have been a heretic. You know, our first president, George Washington, they say he was probably killed 10 years before he should have been, because he got sick and they put leeches on him. They said your blood must not be good, so we've got to drain your blood, you know, as if draining your blood is going to help anything. And so they put leeches on him to suck out all of his blood, and then he died. That was the first president of the United States. Off to a great start. The point is that these were widely embraced, endorsed, believed. Are you with me? You know, for 30 years, the experts said to us, they took us to free steak dinners to teach us a new scientific way of feeding cows, where we take dead cows, we grind them up, and we feed them back to cows, right? And our family, we were branded as Luddites, Neanderthals, barbarians, because we didn't embrace this new scientific idea. But then 30 years later, there was this big global, oops, maybe we shouldn't ought to done that. Right? So suddenly, who was right? Yeah, us. And so, you know, we are smart enough to innovate things that we can't physically, spiritually, morally, or emotionally metabolize. And so what happens is every generation spends half of its time, energy, and creativity solving the innovations of the previous generation. Most of the problems we're trying to solve, we created. Are you with me? And we created them in a context of belief, of thought, that created that. Of course, the new one now is genetically modified organisms. GMOs, you know, they're going to feed the world, we have to, or, you know, everybody's going to starve to death. This is what I call today's orthodoxy. Here's my question. My question is, wouldn't it be neat if we could spring into the future 50 years, 100 years, and look back today and realize, I wonder what I believe today. What does my generate? What's happening? Is this? I get pretty animated. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. I get pretty animated up here. What's going to be the thing that we believe today as orthodoxy, unquestioned, that our grandchildren or great-grandchildren will look back and say, with that in mind, I want to submit to you that one way to do that is to look at the ecological economy as a template and say, what do we know? There are a lot of things that we don't know. In fact, as smart as we are, we still don't know a lot of things. I mean, this morning to this group of farmers, I was explaining that an earthworm eats soil and excretes castings in the same amount. I mean, like a pound in and a pound out. And the pound out has 3 times the nitrogen, 7 times the phosphorus, and 11 times the potassium of what came in. And nobody knows how that happens. As smart as we are, we still don't know how that happens. Is that a good thing? Yes. So we don't have to know how that happens. It's probably just good enough to know that if we have healthy earthworms, we might have healthy soil. And so if we figure out what the earthworm likes to eat and can have more earthworms to do their magic on the soil, maybe we'd be better. We don't have to answer everything. So I would like to go quickly, before I show pictures, to set a context of, here's the assumption. Here's the picture I want you to think about. Imagine being a frog. You're a frog. Not waiting for a kiss, but a frog nonetheless. There's no hope for you. You're just a frog. You're not a frog prince waiting for the kiss. All right. And you're sitting on a pond 500 years ago. 500 years ago. We're looking like 1500. All right. Here, anywhere in the world. And the question is, I'm a frog sitting on a pond 500 years ago. What do I know about the world? What do I know about the world? All right, so let me run down these very quickly, and then we're going to go to the slides. One thing I know about the world is there is no animalless ecology. There is no healthy ecology that doesn't have animals, okay? And I mean animals right in it, and a lot of animals, okay? We live in a time where we think that we can have healthy ecologies in a fundamentally segregated system where the plants are over here and the animals are over here, and that's not the way ecology works. They're fundamentally integrated. There is a relational complexity, indeed a migratory choreography, a symbiotic synergistic relationship. All right, these are all, I might be going too fast for you in English, but there are some wonderful positive things that happen with the animal ecology. So generally speaking, we could say if the diversity, number, types of animals are decreasing, as a frog sitting here, if suddenly there are fewer deer coming to the pond, fewer birds, not very many kinds of birds, not very many kinds of fish in the pond, and not very many of my relatives still living, chances are things are not healthy. Are you with me? This is so fundamental. It's almost like going back to elementary school. But do you realize there are very smart, educated bankers, politicians, and industry leaders who actually don't believe that this is important. And yet I submit that this is the balance sheet of history. And if I'm going to bet on a horse, I want the horse that has a proven track record. And what I'm suggesting is a track record that has actually worked throughout time. One of the reasons for animals in the ecology is because they're the only thing that can move fertility around. All right? In the natural gravitational move of biomass and minerals and twigs and leaves and dead grass, it migrates downhill. It eventually goes into a stream or a creek, okay? But it migrates downhill. One of the advantages of all the animals is that they can eat it downhill in the valleys. Now, I realize we're in the Netherlands. This is not as but just bear with me, okay? They take this fertile valley material. You're in a very special place, okay? They take this valley material and they move it uphill. Why do they move it up? They move it uphill in their bellies, in their crops, in their beaks. They move it uphill. They perch on a tree or they lounge, cow-like, on the top. Why do they go uphill to digest their food? Safety. Thank you. Predators. Exactly. And so they can get up on top and they can look around and see where are the lions, where are the foxes, where are the wolves, okay? And this is the role for animals. You know, before there were manure spreaders and tractors and moving it around, animals tend to be the ultimate soil agronomy democratizers, okay? And the predator-prey relationship is critical for maintaining that. Number two, what's the second thing that I understand as a frog sitting on a pond in 1500? Energy comes from proximity, not from outside. Where does energy come from? The sun, the wind, the movement of water, okay? Energy comes from within the system, not from outside the system. As I'm sitting there on my rock in the pond, energy is not something that I get from 5 continents away, or 5 whatever, a long ways. Energy is in situ. It's derived in situ, all right? And it's close. Number 3, the next thing I see is I look out from my rock and I notice, you know, carbon doesn't move very far. Carbon doesn't move very far. You know, why? In this system, we're not putting, you know, dehydrated manure in a ship and sending it to Africa. You know, in our country, we put chicken feathers. You know, we're known for all the chickens we raise. Feathers. We put feathers in shipping containers and send them to Sri Lanka for feather meal, for stuff. Nature doesn't do that. Nature doesn't move carbon around very far. About the farthest carbon moves around in nature is a leaf blows off of a tree. The wind blows that leaf, what, 100 meters, 200 meters, but it doesn't blow at 500 miles, okay? Grass, marsh weeds grow up, they fall over, they don't go 1,000 miles away. They fall over. The carbon cycle is maintained very locally, okay? Number 4, hydration occurs on site. Now I know in the Netherlands, you're tending to think, how do we get rid of all the water? Most of the planet is trying to figure out how to get water, okay? But let's just for our discussion purposes appreciate that frog sitting on the pond understands, his understanding of the water cycle is that the rain determines carrying capacity, productive capacity, the vegetation that's there, the type of vegetation, all of that carrying capacity and production is determined by hydration, by the amount of rain that falls there. I can't just always go and get deficiencies from elsewhere, whether it's grain, water, energy, or whatever. I'm pretty dependent on what's proximate. Okay? Number 5, Seasonality dominates biology. Seasonality dominates biology. In other words, all of the cycles of life, the rest, the growth, the busyness, the freezing, the thawing, the cycle of life is subjugated to the seasons. Spring, summer, winter, fall. Okay? As soon as you try to militantly fight seasonality, and you fight against seasonality, like trying to make cows lactate in January, or hatch chicks in December, when the lowest day length is, as soon as you start trying to militate against seasonality, it gets really difficult. That's why anti-seasonality is extremely expensive. Very expensive. All right? So seasonality dominates biology. Whatever's living, whatever's going on, its cycle is keyed to seasonality. If you notice, the calving was when? When there's no grass? No. The calving and the lactation cycle coincide with the grass cycle. And when the grass goes down, then the cows are beginning to dry off. Number six. Disturbance and rest cycles move the ecology places. I call disturbance and rest ecological exercise. Okay? The ecology is not static. As much as you'd like to see a piece of land stay the same forever and ever and ever, it doesn't and it won't. It will flood, it will burn, it will freeze, it will blow over, there are things that happen. And so volcanoes, floods, droughts, fire, digging animals, all of these things are part of a bigger picture that brings disturbance and rest to the ecology. And those have to be strategic. They're very timed. They're very carefully done. But the disturbance and rest cycles are part of that ecological exercise. Number 7, the waste of one thing is the input for the next. Nature doesn't waste anything. I'm sitting there. I'm still a frog, right? I'm sitting on my rock, and I notice there is no waste. Again, Bill McKibben says there is no someplace else. Okay? Everything, a decomposing critter becomes the feedstock for a bunch of microbes that then grow algae, which then feeds the fish, everything, there is no waste. Nature doesn't make landfills. Okay? There is no someplace else in nature. It's all my backyard. And so in nature, manure feeds the plants, not 10-10-10, not chemical fertilizer, what feeds plants is the biological, the generation from there. The death-life cycle, that whole death-life cycle, you live, you die, you decompose, and then you're regenerated to life, death, decomposition, regeneration, and this cycle of life is fundamental to the way nature handles waste. There's no ultimate loss of matter. Nature is all about preserving matter. There is no away. It's all reused on site. Number 8, processes are driven by local information. Processes are driven by local information. That frog sitting on the rock in the pond doesn't need to know anything from anywhere else to be a successful frog. And you know what? That frog does not have to concoct strange theories. He's simply looking at indigenous adaptation. What fits for here? He doesn't have to answer what fits her over there, or what's the frog over in the 5 mile away pond doing? He is simply bounded in thought, in practice, he's bounded by localness, by adaptation to local issues. You know, it's so easy, isn't it, for us, as soon as somebody starts, you know, putting some tension on our protocol or our model, we immediately want to say, well, what about you? You know, over there in the U.S., look at what they're doing. Look what those Germans are doing. Look what those crazy French are doing. You know, it's so easy, isn't it, to point fingers at what somebody else is doing. It's like a friend told me, he said, you know, I kept saying it was they and them and those people all the time, those politicians, those bankers, those loan officers, those whatever, PhDs, whatever, you know. Those, you know, Bayer just bought Monsanto. You know, we've got all these, we love bogeymen, don't we? Because if we've got bogeymen, it's not me that's the problem. And this guy told me, he said, I woke up one day and I grew up when I realized I look in the mirror and it's not them and us, it's just us. It really is, it's just us. And this frog on the pond, one of the things that he understands looking around his situation is that if there are going to be solutions and if I'm going to study processes, I need to look at them in my own context, in my own place. What is my special opportunity? What is my special hurdle? And then customize what we have to our own place. Number 9, there are 10 of these, so we're almost done. And we're going to see pictures. Number 9, I'm a frog. Remember, 500 years ago. Got to keep reminding us where this play is taking place. And I'm looking out from my rock. Next thing I notice is, you know, there aren't very many annuals. Everything's about perennials. Everything's about perennials. There aren't very many annuals. And yet when you think about modern farming orthodoxy, if I'm not planting something, I'm not even farming. I've done presentations and these old, you know, curmudgeon farmers come out and say, wait, you don't plant, no, I haven't planted a seed in 60 years. You don't have a plow, you don't have a disc, you don't have I don't even have a pesticide applicator, you don't have an herbicide applicator, you don't have a spray rig, all this. Well, you don't do any farming then, do you? No, I guess not. We don't do any farming. I don't know anything about that stuff. The frog sitting on the rock in the pond looks out and says, you know, nobody's planting anything. This is pretty much perennials. It's all about perennials. See, perennials have a very different energy cycle than annuals. Okay? Perennials store their carbohydrate energy in the roots, and they bring all these sugars in. They take sunbeams and bring those sunbeams into the roots, and the roots then have this underground trade cafe going on. I'll trade you 2 polysaccharides for 3, borons and 1, whatever, calcium. All right. The point is that there's at the root hair space, there's this incredible, did this thing tip again? All right. There's this incredible cafe of trade going on, all right? I always think about the Star Trek cafe, you know, with the, you know, and it goes and where they meet Harrison Ford with the Millennium Falcon. Nature prefers perennials. You see, perennials put their energy in the ground. That's their bank account. Annuals put their energy up in their seeds. Okay? So annuals tend to deplete soil health. Perennials add to soil health. And yet, what are we all concerned about? What are we all working on? We're all working on annuals. In the U.S., we subsidize 6 of them: corn, cotton, soybeans, sugar, wheat, and rice. And if you don't grow that, you don't deserve a subsidy. It's quite amazing that we actually incentivize the only things that deplete the soil. Perennials are far less risky. Perennials pump organic matter into the ground. And finally, number 10, I'm a frog sitting on my rock. The final thing I noticed as a frog sitting on my rock 500 years ago is it's all about polycultures. It's not monocultures. Goodness, sitting on my rock, I see weeds, I see a salamander, I see a deer coming down, I see an egret sitting on the edge, I see an oak tree, I see a willow tree, man, all this stuff. It's a polyculture. It's a polyculture. It's diversity, multiple species of everything. Amazing. This isn't just a pond of frogs. You know, and we all participate. You know, I've never met a frog that woke up one morning and said, you know what, this whole ecology thing, I'm not going to participate today. Harumph, you know, I'm just going to go over and sit here on my rock and I'm not going to participate. No, that frog has to participate, and all frogs do. So, as we look, and when we look at these polycultures, we begin to realize very quickly, well, polycultures, why, nobody in their right mind would think polycultures in efficient industrial farming. Why, you can't have cows and pigs on the same place. Cows, pigs, chickens, and apple trees, why, that's outrageous. You sound like a raving heretic. So, yes, we should laugh at ourselves. Because what I've just described, these 10 principles, what I'm suggesting is that is the fundamental template of nature. And I'm suggesting that these 10 principles, 20 years from now, 40 years from now, 100 years from now, if I came back and did this speech, these principles would not change. That's my point. And so what I'm looking for those bedrock principles that I can look at and say, that works. Why? Because it worked in 1500, it worked in 500, it worked in BC. Are you with me? And if we can actually identify the protocols that have worked for 10,000 years and duplicate them, possibly we'll be here 10,000 years from now to look back and say, well, I'm glad we made that change. Because, you know, there's an old Chinese saying that says, if you keep going the way you're going to end up where you're headed. It's called a trajectory. And if the trajectory that we're on leads us to a place that's not as good as we are today, that's a trajectory that ought to be changed. Are you with me? That's a trajectory that ought to be changed. All right. So this is our context. All right. Let's look at pictures. Makes this thing work here. Okay. So yeah, I know you're kind of surprised to see a sawmill in a presentation like this. But I start with trees. I'm just going to show you a few pictures. I don't have very many. They're going to be real quick here. But we are big believers in trees, and we think generally a landscape should be 25% trees for habitat, for lumber, for self-sufficiency, for carbon cycling, all sorts of reasons that there should be trees. Again, nature. Look around nature. There is no treeless place. Even prairies have trees, and so. How are we going to make them valuable? Well, we have an on-farm sawmill, and we mill them up so we make our own boards, our own lumber. And this way we can fix things, maintain things, and do things, pretty self-sufficiently. And then we chip up the tops. What do I have to do here? I'll just hit this. There we go. That's fine. What am I doing? Oh, yeah. It works. If it's on, it's better. That's another principle from the frog. You've got to be on. Yeah, all right. Then the tops we chip up, and those become bedding for the cows in the wintertime when we run out of grass or when we have inclement weather and want to house the cows. So you see here ground level, you see here bedding level, and I want you to notice these feed boxes are on a pulley so we can raise them and lower them as this bedding builds up. And this bedding will build up to over 1 meter high, okay? And as we, so those cows are dropping material out their back end every day, 50 pounds a day. It's quite a lot, and it's really sloppy. If it gets dry, it vaporizes. If it gets wet, it wants to leach into the groundwater. So this is our fertilizer. Some people buy chemical fertilizer. This is our fertilizer expense. And the beauty is we pay ourselves, the carbon stays on site. Okay? So I'll be bringing back these frog principles as we go through these pictures to help you understand what we're trying to do here. This carbon stays on site. In fact, in my state of Virginia right now, if all the money currently spent on chemical fertilizer were spent on carbon, diseased trees, down trees, junk trees, straw, peanut hulls, all the biomass, 85% of all the material thrown in landfills is decomposable biomass. That's immoral. That's sinful. All right, and now I hear that the Netherlands is talking about trying to dehydrate manure and send it to South America, Africa, and China, so you can import, soybeans. This is very confusing to the frog sitting on the rock in the pond. Okay? Very confusing. We can actually pay for this protective structure. We can pay for it in 2 years in fertilizer savings alone. Now, the beauty of linking up all of this manure and urine with carbon is that we can then compost it, and that completely changes its volatility and its leaching capacity, because now all those nutrients are stable, locked up into the dead microbes that decomposed that material. And so you see the pigs here waiting in the wings. So when the grass begins to grow in the spring, then the cows go back out onto the pastures, and we move pigs in, better known as pigaerators. Aerobics, like oxygen, all right? And the pigs, what we've done is we've put corn in this bedding as it built up. And so the pigs now seek the corn. That pays their salary to do the aeration and turn this from an anaerobic, what we call a carbon diaper, and turn that into an aerobic compost, and the animals are doing all the work. So we're not doing this with machines, with petroleum. It doesn't even take us any time. This can be done, and the pigs go do this while we go read a book or attend a conference. Okay? We don't even have to steer the pigs. And the pigs don't need the oil change. They don't need spare parts. They never sue you. They're great. They're great partners. And what a retirement program! When you're done with them, you eat them. So you don't have to worry about old care taking care of them. The reason that farmers have had to get big in order to stay in business is because when your assets depreciate and rot and rust, you have to turn so many pounds or bushels or whatever of material in order to recapitalize all the overheads that rot, rust, and depreciate. But when your equity doesn't depreciate, when you're using appreciating equipment, suddenly the profit potential becomes size neutral. You can make just as much money with 2 pigs and 5 cows as 200 pigs and 1,000 cows. Because you're not having to recapitalize the overhead that rots, rusts, and depreciates. That's what puts people in a bind. When you get a capital-intensive, single-use infrastructure, we think we do this to free us from labor and from work and to keep us from, you know, being tied down to things and give us freedom, when in actuality, all these things actually enslave us, because they then have to be paid for, and even if they don't work or become obsolete, we continue to use them. I mean, what happens when a young person goes to a grass dairy conference and comes home and they've got this confinement dairy, and they come home all excited, 19-year-old daughter, you know, she comes home and she's excited to tell somebody what she's just seen all day, and so the first person coming out of that she sees when she gets home is Grandpa, you know, and he's toddling out of the barn, right? She runs and says, Grandpa, guess what? I went to this thing today, and you know, we wouldn't have to make any silage. We can get rid of the tractors, get rid of the silo. You know, we call that a bankruptcy tube. We don't have to scrape manure. We just take this little thread of electric fence and we just move those cows around. They self-harvest, they self-fertilize. And you know, she gets about to that point and Grandpa says, now you just wait a minute here, little missy. Your family and I, we've spent a whole lifetime trying to pour concrete and bend rebar and put together plans to borrow money from the bank and make this equipment so you wouldn't have to work so hard, and now you're just gonna walk away from it? Whose child are you? Whose child are you? I gotta wait for him to take the picture, see? I come out of character. I'm really a Hollywood celebrity in disguise. The Kardashians spend every day at our house. So you see, what happens is that we get so attached to our infrastructure that it blinds us to the opportunities that might be out there. And so what we think is going to give us freedom actually enslaves us. Because even if we're not economically attached to it, we're emotionally attached to it. And that's the truth. That's why big government solutions don't impress me. I like little solutions, lots of little solutions, local solutions, democratized solutions, grassroots solutions, home solutions. That's why what you do with your food bill and how you buy food is far more important than what happens at the EU tomorrow. Because ultimately, you and I determine the landscape we're going to inherit, one bite at a time. And the system that's going to proliferate will be the system that we patronize, not the system that we don't patronize. So that's why our eating and food decisions have a direct impact on the future. And so the pigs then turn all this beautiful material into compost. We spread that out on the fields, and that becomes our entire fertility program. It has been for decades. So we've never bought a bag of chemical fertilizer. And there's nothing that grows soil, that builds fertility like compost. When we came to the farm in 1961, it wouldn't support 10 cows. I can remember as a child walking the fields. Remember, this was a verdant silvopasture when Governor Spotswood in 1700, this is before the Revolution, before we beat those British with pitchforks and sticks. Governor Spotswood sent some friends over into the Shenandoah Valley where we live to report back and tell him what they found. And they said they found a silvopasture, widely scattered trees, and tall grasses. They said everywhere we rode, now this is 80 miles long and 20 miles wide, 80 miles by 20 miles. You have to do your own kilometer thing. All right. They said everywhere we rode, we could take the grass and tie it in a knot above the horse's saddle. See, when we say grass today, we're brain damaged. We are. We think grass, the only thing we can think of is lawns and soccer fields and golf courses. But when I say grass, I'm talking about grass in a knot above the horse's saddle. Okay? And we can bring that back. And on our farm, where we had large areas the size of this room that were solid rock, because when the Europeans came, they turned all that grass upside down with the plow, and over 200 years, 3 to 8 feet of topsoil washed off our hills. Remember, we're not flat like here. And we get thunderstorms, and it's not, you know, when we get freezing and thawing in the winter. I know you get all that. And I've seen a lot of bare, naked soil here already in a day that shouldn't be bare and naked. Because nature, think about it, nature never makes bare soil, ever. Okay? And so these rock piles today are 12 inches of soil. Now, they're not 3 feet like they used to be, but they're 12 inches. In fact, we had so little soil that Dad poured concrete in car tires and pushed half-inch pipes down in there. And the way we built electric fence in the early days was he'd pile these up on a tractor platform, and my brother and I were little kids, and the two of us could get on the edge of these concrete stanchions and tip them off the tractor platform as he drove slow. Then he'd put the electric fence stakes down in them because we didn't have enough soil to hold up electric fence stakes. And so our farm, the reason Mom and Dad bought it in 1961, because it was the armpit of the community. You know, it was the ugliest gullied rock pile. It had been, abused. It had been absentee owned for a long time and leased out, so it had been abused. Today, it's arguably, unquestionably, by far the most verdant place in the valley, in the area. And I'm not bragging on me. I'm bragging on the frog. I'm bragging on those systems work. That's all we've done. It hasn't been creative. It's simply been study the frog, study the templates. Now, how do we do them? Okay, that's the only question. To the point that now, several years ago, when we had our mower broke down, so we had a neighbor come over. He's an old guy. Most of them are old. They're all dying off. And he came over with his nice big mower, And, of course, he'd been there all of his life. He knew what the farm was like before we came. And he got done mowing. And so I went out with the checkbook to pay him. And he turned the tractor off. Now, there's two things that a farmer does that when they do that, you better pay attention. One is turn the tractor off. They never turn their tractors off, okay? And the second thing is when I, climbed up into the cab there with him, he turned it off, and the next thing he did, he took his tobacco from one side of his mouth and moved it to the other side. Now, when a farmer moves his tobacco from one side of his mouth to the other side of his mouth, you better pay attention. Because he's getting ready to say something. So I get up there, and he says, I ain't never seen nothing like it. Never seen nothing like it. I didn't know you could grow hay with mulch. That's what he calls, he doesn't know the word compost. He doesn't know how to say it. All he knows is he sees us carrying all this carbon around all the time. And he calls it mulch. Okay? But for us, that was a big day when an old neighbor who'd seen this place from his childhood as the rock pile said he'd never seen hay like we were growing. This stuff works. This stuff works. Okay. And then the pigs go out into pig pastures. So these are pig pastures. Remember what I said about silvopastures? Mixing trees and grass? All right. So this has had pigs for 20 years. Now, it looks like a moonscape when the pigs leave. But that tillage, that disturbance, remember disturbance and rest? Here it is at rest. Okay? Here it is at disturbance. Okay? So the pigs are going to disturb it, and that disturbance is exercise to move it forward. This is the whole deal. There's no concrete, no house, just pigs. And then we can even put them in the woods. And they disturb under the trees and awaken all the latent seed bank under the trees. And so suddenly, instead of just having trees and static leaves or pine needles, it's trees and a whole new understory of biomass. So we can actually generate as much income per acre from forest as we can from open land. Now there's an economic incentive to plant trees and harvest, and the trees become the shelter for the pigs. There's no concrete, no fans, no roofs, no tiles, no manure to scrape. And suddenly we can net $3,000 an acre with pigs because we've eliminated the overhead. Okay? What I'm showing you, I hope by now you're understanding, this is not a talk about changing dairies. It's not a talk about changing apple trees, orcharding. It is a talk about how we as humans caress our landscape so that we leave it in better place for our children. Because ultimately, the wealth of a civilization is completely dependent on and tied up in the health and wealth of its own ecology. And the story of civilizational rise and collapse is a story of conquistador mentality toward our ecological umbilical. And when we respect our ecological umbilical and we become a landscape masseuse instead of a conquistador, suddenly things change. Now, when we look at how soils are built in nature, what do we see? We see animals. And all deep soils in nature have been built with herbivores and prairie, perennials. The reason is because grasses have a faster metabolism than trees and bushes. Trees and bushes can never generate the amount of biomass per square foot, per square meter, than bushes and than grass. Grass has a much faster energy cycle. Now, it's counterintuitive because you look at the forest and you say, wow, look at all that carbon, look at all that biomass. But that is 30 years of storage or 40 years of storage. If you took all the grass from your lawn, a square meter, and piled it all up for 40 years, that'd be way more biomass than is in that forest next door. That's why all of the fertile soils of the planet have been built under herbivores with prairie, with perennials. But it's not just haphazard. It's not just anarchy out there. There's a very, very clear choreography as to what happens. And what happens is those herbivores move. They don't stay in the same place. They move. And secondly, they're mobbed up. They're not even spread out. They're mobbed up. Anybody know why? Predators, thank you. Safety. There's a lion, a jaguar, a wolf, a fox over there in the bushes. And that keeps them mobbed up and tight together. All right? Because a mob is a lot harder to attack than an individual. Okay? And so they're moving, they're mobbed up, and they're mowing. Okay? They're mowing. They're pruning. You see, grass grows in a sigmoid curve, an S curve. It starts slow, then grows fast, then slows down in senescence. I call this diaper grass, teenage grass, nursing home grass. Are you with me? What we want to do and what nature wants to do is have that plant in the rapid growth cycle as much as possible. Not down here slow in diaper grass, not down here dying in senescence, in nursing home grass. So the role of the herbivore in nature is to come in and prune, just like a viticulturalist would prune a vineyard or an orchardist would prune an apple tree, to stimulate verdant, fresh, new growth. Remember, disturbance and rest. Okay? Disturbance and rest. And disturbance is critical for innovation, for freshening up, for new things, you know. Innovation is disturbing. Innovative ideas are disturbing to the status quo, aren't they? You know, good marriages happen when we have disturbing conversations. You know, if nobody can have a disturbing conversation, we never get to the bottom of problems, do we? And so disturbance is critical. So they're moving, they're mobbed up, and they're mowing. Well, how do we do that on a domestic scale where you only own a couple of hectares or where you have private ownership? We do it with electric fencing, okay? Electric fencing is the tool that allows us to put a steering wheel, an accelerator, and a brake on that four-legged pruner. And we literally steer them around the landscape for exactly the right amount of time, at the right place. And what this does is greatly accelerate the productive capacity of the forage so that this forage is more productive than corn and soybeans. The actual amount of production per acre. And look, we haven't had to fertilize, it's self-fertilized. It's self-harvested. There's no planter, there's no harvester, there's no equipment, there's no tractor. It's all running on real-time solar energy, and the production per acre is identical to grain. When I do this to corn growers in Illinois, I get two whiteboards, and I say, you give me the numbers, and we do a budget for growing corn. And then we do one for growing animal protein on perennials with herbivores. And this always beats the corn because there's no depreciable inventory. There's no overheads. See, we are strategically replacing depreciable inventory with management skill. So when you replace pharmaceuticals, depreciable infrastructure, buildings, and equipment with management skills, you move your equity from physical material that can be foreclosed on, somebody can take that away, to non-physical. Our equity moves from physical to non-physical. And there's not a banker in the world that will come to you and say, I'm going to foreclose on your skill. Fortunately. Better not give me any ideas, had I? There's not a banker in the world that can come and say, I'm going to foreclose on your management. Okay? Very powerful concept. All right. So here we are in the winter on stockpiled forage. Here we are late summer. But it's the same idea. We call this mob stocking, herbivorous, solar conversion, lignified carbon, sequestration, fertilization. And that's a mouthful even in English, okay? But in the neighborhood, the cow days per acre averages 80 cow days per acre. So if you go and buy some pasture, our climate, our rainfall, blah, 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 our average is 80 cow days per acre. A cow day is what one cow will eat in a day. So what you eat today is one person day of food. Everything you're going to eat today, that's one person day of food. So everything that a cow eats today is one cow day. Are you with me? That for us, that's like inches centimeters to a carpenter, and bushels to an apple grower. Are you with me? Okay, so it's a constant, cow days. In our county, it's 80 per acre. On our farm, we're averaging more than, you ready for the number? 400. 400. And we don't have the best farm. Okay? Again, that's not to brag. Please don't take this as prideful. It is a way to give glory to these templates that work, to the frog in the pond. That's what we have to appreciate, okay? These systems work. So there's a tension today. There's a tension that if we're environmentally minded, oh no, that can't make money, because you can't make money on environmental mindedness. Okay, so we've got to be economically minded and sacrifice the environment to be economic. I don't like that either. And I'm saying we can have both economy and environment at the same time. But it's going to take a 180-degree paradigm shift. It's going to be the paradigm shift that moves from the earth is flat to the earth is round. It's a paradigm shift that moves from the spirits of the bubonic plague to fleas on mice. It's a paradigm that shifts from germ theory to terrain theory. That hasn't happened yet. It will sometime, okay? But those are major paradigm shifts, and that will happen. So we use shade mobiles, so that we can concentrate the manure and urine where we want it instead of where the cows want it. And that's an integral part of the fertility program and comfort program as well. Water becomes an issue, so we've dug a lot of ponds, and we use those to water the stock. We also use it for irrigation. This is the New Zealand K-line irrigation system. And so when it's dry, we can continue to convert solar energy into biomass even when it's dry. And for us, drought is always around the corner. The old timers in our community always say we're just one thunderstorm away from a drought all year. That's kind of the way it goes. So if we have good rain, it's great. If we don't, it gets dry real fast. But the point is that the water is there to be used. Here's another thing that we've just enjoyed doing. This is imported from Australia from a guy named Colin Seiss. And what he's got 2,000 Australian farmers growing grain crops without any herbicide or fertilizer, using animals as a perennial sod developer. Okay, so what happens is you go in, this is what we did, all right? So we go in with the cows, we go in and we graze it off, and then we plant, in this case, it was Sudex, sorghum Sudan hybrid, for a summer high energy, high carbohydrate feed. And then right before the seeds germinate, you go in and graze it again. Now, the cows don't like to graze it again. It's not really regrown very much, and they're not happy. But it's okay. One day of unhappiness gets them months of happiness, all right? So disturbance and rest is okay, all right? And so we go in, we graze that off with the cows, and notice here's the electric fence running down through here. I want you to notice, this looked just like this yesterday, all right? That's 100 cows on 1/5 of a hectare. 400 cow days per acre. That's just one pass in the year, all right? It works. Very, very powerful. No tillage, no nothing, and it never loses its blanket. Then behind the cows, we follow the cows with the egg mobiles. And the egg mobiles have 800 chickens that free range out. They scratch through the cow patties. eat out the fly larva, and spread the cow patties out onto the ground and debug the pastures and turn the grasshoppers and insects into eggs. So while other people are using grubicides and parasiticides and veterinarian bills and pharmaceuticals to deal with those problems with their cows, we just collect $300,000 worth of eggs as a byproduct of the pasture sanitation program. Okay? So you take the liability and turn it into an asset. This is the Millennium Feather Net. So this is 1,000 chickens on a 1/4 acre. This is using high-tech electric netting that keeps the predators out, keeps the chickens in. Who would have thought, even just 40 years ago, that there could be a material that would keep out wolves, coyotes, raccoons, and keep chickens in, that 50 meters of it only weighs 12 pounds, and one person can take it up and put it down in 10 minutes. Is that cool or what? It's very cool, okay? So this means that for the first time in human history, we can now actually produce commercial-sized flocks of chickens more hygienically, more chicken-friendly, and more sanitary than you could a backyard flock 50 years ago. This is a cool time to be alive, okay? We're hatching our own layers as well, and working on our genetic base as well. In the winter, the chickens come into these hoop houses, and pigs underneath, chickens up here. You can put, we've got rabbits down here. There's all sorts of things in here, but it makes confused pathogens and uses the entire structure. Then when all these animals come out in the spring, we go in with vegetables, and we can plant vegetables and make thousands of dollars during the spring, summer, and fall in these hoop houses. If you're going to have infrastructure, keep cash flow running through it, but use different species so you create pathogenic cul-de-sacs throughout the season. Dead ends. Rabbits, this is a hairpin. We move the rabbits along the pasture. These are meat rabbits. Broilers, we move these in 10 by 12 by 2 foot tall shelters through the field. This field gets, cows and turkeys and eggmobiles and broilers. So there's a lot going on here in this choreography. Notice here the cows down here. This is turkeys. There's eggmobiles over here and broilers over here. And so all of this ends up actually creating $10,000 an acre in income in the pasture. That would be 10, 20, that'd be like $23,000 a hectare income. Now suddenly there's enough income to have a second salary, see, and to stack other things. So here's a herd share dairy that one of our apprentices started on one of the rental farms. That's his milking parlor. Did I say something about low overheads? Modular, mobile, management intensive, all right? Farrowing pigs. Another apprentice started farrowing pigs as an independent fiefdom. We want fiefdoms. Shiitake mushrooms. Another one wanted to grow shiitake mushrooms. So once you start with this, you look at a landscape, you begin realizing why we're not using this for half of what it could be. We could leverage the soil, air, and water, and there's not a farm in the world that can't double, triple, quadruple, quintuple its productive capacity by adding diversity and other fiefdoms. Honeybees, all right? We have the honey as well. Sheep, this is one of my grandsons. Ducks, another one of my grandsons. School tours, agritourism. We market into the city with metropolitan buying clubs. And it's all people-centric. We don't apologize for a farm that substitutes pharmaceuticals, depreciable, capital-intensive infrastructure, and energy dependency with people. We think that's fine. And ultimately, it's about succession. What do the 18-year-olds do? What do the children do? Ultimately, in my opinion, a farm is not sustainable until it's supporting 2 full-time salaries from 2 different generations. At that point, it becomes sustainable. And what that means is we have to figure out a way that all of us on the farm, all of us in the city, all of us in the community, all of us in the country can get to a dream that is sacred enough, big enough, healing enough, and righteous enough that it can energize us for a lifetime. Thank you.
Joel, don't step down. Don't step down. Joel, thank you very much for your lecture. It's time for questions now. En de vragen, your translation is working? Yes, it is. U mag uw vragen in het Nederlands stellen. Als u het in het Engels wil doen, mag dat natuurlijk ook. Maar wie wil beginnen met de eerste vraag? Deze meneer zit vooraan. En ik vraag u, wie bent u en wat doet u?
Ik ben Leon, commandeur van het Noordwind College, veehouderij, docent. En ik zit hier ook namens alle mensen die de livestream volgen. En nou, een aantal keren is voorbijgekomen de vraag over Donald Trump, net verkozen president. U begon uw inleiding over een bloed aftappen. Nou, dat vond ik wel interessant. De vraag is eigenlijk, heeft Donald Trump al gesproken met de kikker? Of heeft u al gesproken met Donald Trump over de kikker? Want dat lijkt me wel een essentiële vraag.
Donald Trump has not asked me about the frog yet. I would love to have a conversation with Donald Trump about the frog. Because I think that this conversation I think this conversation is a place where left, right, green, conservative, whatever, where everybody can come to the table and say, this is truth. And when everybody can come to the table and say, this is truth, this I know, then we can start having a discussion on, well, how do we get there? And see, I don't think that the average person, let alone the average political leader, has actually taken the time to sit down and actually wrestle with what is truth, what is real truth, bedrock stuff. I did a day of lobbying for one of our delegates in our General Assembly one day on a bill, and we got done for the end of the day. It was nice to be considered an asset to this particular delegate. Usually I'm a liability, but this particular day I was an asset. And I got done, and I told him, we were sitting in his office at the General Assembly, and I said, you know, I really believe if we had had an hour with each one of these other delegates, I think they'd all come around to our position. But we didn't have an hour. We had 2 minutes, you know. And he said, and this is the point. He said, the way this system works, this system, and he was, you know, is there's so much out there that everything is about choosing sides quickly. It's not actually about coming around a table and solving problems. It's which side are you on? Tell me now. You know, quick. And so it's all about picking sides as quickly as possible. And folks, that's not a system that works. That's not a system that's going to get to a real solution. It'll get a Band-Aid on something for a year, but it will not actually get us to a solution. So yeah, I would welcome a conversation with President-elect Trump. It will be an interesting time. I'll drink to that.
The lady over there.
Yes, I think you have a very interesting circular system on your Polyface farm. Now it seems that lumber and trees are a very important part of that circular system. I know you've been around Friesland these 2 days, today, and I hope you noticed that we don't have that many trees, and it takes quite a time for them to grow. So, do you have any suggestion on the important input that you have from those trees to see another product here in Friesland that could do that, take that role?
You mean so you don't have to grow trees?
Well,
She
you have
means
another.
how to grow trees as quickly as grass.
No, no, well, you have them as an important part for your cattle to stand. I'm actually Brechtje Hamik. I'm from Uushof. We have vegetables and
Yes.
and fruit. What we do in a
Okay.
permaculture way, but
Yeah.
so
All right.
so this part we don't have that much.
Yeah. All right. Well, my only answer, and I wish I had some sort of tree that I could give you, and you would have 20-foot trees tomorrow. I mean, that would be great. If I had that, I probably wouldn't be doing this.
Catalpa can and Polonia.
But with that in mind, I think it's important. I think there's another one of these old kind of sayings that, well, if we know where we need to go, where we ought to go, if we don't start today, we just continue to put off where we need to go until we start. I mean, so I think I'm a fan of tithing. You know, it's a spiritual sense, tithing. Why can't we tithe land and say and put, you know, a couple of hectares in 1 year?
Joel, they don't understand what tithing is.
Tithing?
Yeah.
Tithing. 10%. You give to a church. Give to a church, 10%.
De
Tithing.
tiendenregeling dus.
Okay.
Well, maybe for us, wheat is something it grows fast. It has.
Okay. All right. Well, sure. Maybe there is something that could grow fast. I know a fellow in Ontario who grows old heritage long-stemmed rye. It's 8 feet tall, and he makes it into hay because he doesn't have any trees. But he's a dairy farmer, and he really saw the advantage of this. But he didn't have any trees, and so he grows 1 hectare of tall, wild, old style rye. You know, the tall stuff, 8 feet. It's almost 3 meters tall, 3, you know, way up there, and he waits until it gets real dry, where instead of combining it, you know, to take the grain off, he just bales it up. The grain is already in there to feed the pigs when they do this work. Are you with me?
Yeah, we actually had it on our land, and we were so afraid it would fall down and attract all the mice in Friesland. Actually, they found it.
Yeah, well, grain falling over is symptomatic of an unbalanced soil. The stems should be strong enough to hold, and this has really become a problem with chemical fertilizer, is that the soil is not strong enough to make strong enough stems to hold up. And one reason why all the plant breeding has been breed the stems shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter so they don't lodge. But if you have a balanced soil, it tends to hold up a lot longer time. Good.
Another question from the other place.
We've got 2 questions from the live stream, actually related to composting. There is one question from Joost Mulder. He's asking whether to break down or decompose the manure in the barn by pigs. He thinks you lose a lot of energy. And there's another question of Peter, who's asking, do you use the compost on your grassland, and how is it going to be spread?
Oh, all right. Yeah. So the first question is, do we lose a lot of energy with it? No, actually, the composting makes 1 + 1 + 1 = 5. Composting actually takes the minerals and the enzymes and creates a cocktail. Essentially a cocktail that moves everything to a higher place. Now, you can lose energy if it gets too hot, if it gets too dry. I mean, composting is an art as well as a science. one of the beauties of the pigs doing it is that the pigs turn it and then walk on it, turn it and walk on it. So they tend to control the heat because they're actively on top. One of the problems with compost is it's real easy for it to get too hot. And then you get a gray fire fanging. But that's another reason why we have a carbon shed, so that we store all of the carbon in the dry. And so we dry out wood chips and sawdust and things. We dry that out, and like straw, you don't want to use bright, bright waxy straw. You want straw that's been rained on, because that breaks that hydrophobic outside layer, and it becomes much softer. And what you're after is carbon that has all of its spongy pores capable of taking in urine, and that gets your carbon nitrogen ratio in a better place, so it actually composts at the right temperature rather than getting too hot or not hot enough. As far as spreading it on the fields, we do that with a manure spreader, with a front end loader and a manure spreader. And the beauty of the pigs is that they have torn up all this stuff so that it's not all packed together. It makes it real easy to dig it out with a front end loader, because the pigs have already torn it all up and it's compost, as opposed to, if you ever mucked out a stable, with straw and it's all bound together, the pigs unbind it and enjoy doing it.
Another question from the hall. The gentleman over there. Who are you and what are you doing?
Mijn naam is Albert Vormsma. Ik werk bij de provincie Friesland. En mijn vraag is, u produceert wel 10 of 12 of misschien wel 14 soorten producten op uw boerderij. Aan wie verkoopt u die producten?
Okay, who do we sell them to? All right, we supply about 5,000 families in the urban sector in which we use metropolitan buying clubs. This is a hybrid between a farmer's market, a box scheme, and a supermarket. It's an online, it's using online technology to sell, and we service them once every 5 to 6 weeks. So we go 8 times a year to a drop point. They order online. There's an opening bell and a closing bell, and they can change their order between the 2 bells. And then we put their order together so they can cherry pick all the way from half a dozen eggs to a whole beef, all right? So there's no box. You don't have to take this. And there's no farmer's market. It's all pre-sold. So when it goes on the truck to the drop point, it's all pre-ordered and pre-sold. There's no speculation, all right? So it makes it very efficient for us. We don't have to sit there behind a cash register waiting for somebody to have the conversation. Well, honey, do we really want a ribeye steak or do we want a chicken breast, And while they're taking 15 minutes to decide that, you're sitting there waiting. They can have that conversation in their bedroom and order it at 1 o'clock in the morning while you're sleeping, and the computer receives it. Okay? So it's important to understand that we are entering the Uberization of everything. And so the box store, the physical bricks and mortar interface, retail interface, is fast moving into a secondary role with electronic marketing, electronic interfaces. And actually, the electronic interfaces actually have a lower carbon footprint in distribution than physical bricks and mortar. Because, for example, we work now with one electronic aggregator called Door-to-Door Organics. They started as Organica, then they got bought by a bigger outfit and called Relay Foods, and then they got bought by a bigger outfit, and now they're Door-to-Door Organics. And they work with about 200 farmers in the region, and they are now an electronic aggregator to where they do drop deliveries, but they're working with a couple of hundred farmers. And so you can go there and you can shop at this farm, that farm. You can buy everything from crabs from the Chesapeake Bay to flour from a stone ground, a water-powered water wheel mill, you know, everything. All right. And they're using software where they plug in the delivery route and it ensures that the truck never makes a left-hand turn. And just never making a left-hand turn can change the energy requirement on a distribution by 20%. Never having to make a left-hand turn. So I guess in Britain they'd want software that you never make a right-hand turn. But anyway, you see what I'm saying. And so these are moving on. We also sell at the farm. We have an on-farm retail store that's not open all the time, but it has hours, and it's open, and people come there and buy. And then we also service about 50 restaurants, and so we have a full-time delivery driver who works. He has a base salary and then a commission above that. For every pound that he goes above this benchmark, he gets a commission, so that's his big bonus. So he can increase his salary by increasing customers. That ensures that we have a smiling, happy delivery person and not a sour.
What are your price levels?
What are our price levels?
Compared to Walmart's or Whole Foods?
Yeah, I'm glad you gave me Whole Foods and Walmart. We're substantially lower than Whole Foods. We love Whole Foods prices. We come under them all the time. Certainly, we are...
How much under them? 20%?
On some things, 20%. Yeah, but most things more like 10%.
And Whole Foods is expensive, but you all know.
Yeah. But now, if you go Walmart generic, yes, we're more expensive than them. But here's the thing you have to understand. That if you buy unprocessed, our prices are cheaper than even Walmart processed. So our first answer when anybody in the urban sector asks, where do I start? My answer is, get in your kitchen. That's the place to start. I was at the Union Square Farmers Market in New York City, and I asked my hostess, I said, could you please take me to the most expensive potato in the most expensive market in the most expensive city in the world? She said, oh, yes, I know just the guy. So she goes, we're shouldering through the crowd there, and we go to this vendor, and he's got a stack of boxes, and he's got like 20 varieties of potatoes. Red ones, orange ones, white ones, blue ones, green ones, long ones, round ones, skinny ones, gnarly ones. And so I looked through the boxes, and I found the most expensive one, which was an heirloom Peruvian blue fingerling potato.
Oh, dear.
And it was $1.99 a pound, which is expensive for a potato. But all around that green market are supermarkets with 40 meters of fluorescent lighted tile space with shelves of potato chips for $2.99 a pound. So when I say get in your kitchen, I'm not talking about, washboards and, hoop skirts and fetching water from a spring. We have never techno-gadgetized our kitchens more spectacularly than today and been more lost as to where they are. And so we now have fry babies and time bake and slow cookers and microwaves and Cuisinarts and refrigeration and hot and cold water actually in the kitchen. So getting in your kitchen is the most important step you can do in saving money, because then you can buy unprocessed, prepare it, process it, package it, preserve it yourself, and create your own larder from locally sourced material.
Thank you. Next question. Who are you and what are you doing?
My name is Dirk Hart, Network Vital Agriculture and Nutrition. My question is, do you think that it's absolutely necessary to close the organic cycle with intermediation of animals? Or do you think that it would be possible to start closing it without the animals in the first place?
That's a great question, and my first answer is, I don't know. All I know is that there are virtually no organic farmers that I know of who are not importing something from animals outside. It may be fish emulsion, it may be crab meal, it may be manure, dehydrated poultry manure, lots of different kinds of things, but there are just, I may be wrong, but I've looked, and so far there hasn't been a really credible system in which no animals is a part of the system. Maybe that will change.
What would the frog say?
What
would the frog say?
The frog? Well, I think the frog would say, I'm a part of the system. You know, even... So then you have the question of, well, what animals? Like I had one fellow say, well, could we replace the animals with earthworms, for example, you know, and have enough earthworms? That is a great question, and I think one that deserves some good, serious discussion. I don't know. I just don't know. What I do know, though, is that there are no real credible commercial enterprises that are doing it with no animals either on site or bringing a byproduct, whether it's blood meal, bone meal, you know, something from off-site, from animals into the system. That's all I know at this point. Maybe that's, you know, more narrow than it needs to be, but that's my understanding.
So you consider the earthworms poo also as the animal factor in the system?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Earthworms are as well as other bacteria and other things, yes.
Another question.
Yeah, here. Human beings. In
Yeah.
the old days, the manure from the city.
Yes.
It was sent to the country. So humans are animals too. Don't forget that.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, it always amazes me that Sir Albert Howard, who of course is the iconic, you know, who brought the scientific aerobic composting to our world in 1943 in Agricultural Testament. In 1943, he said within a decade or so, this is in 1943, his famous quote is that when we use artificial manures, that's what he called chemical fertilizers, artificial manures, we make artificial soil that grows artificial plants, that makes artificial animals, that make artificial people who can only stay alive with the use of artificials. 1943. But he also said that within a decade, we're going to see that the water-based sewage system of our urban sectors is completely obsolete. And he envisioned what he called diamond cities, where there was 25 houses in the form of a diamond, so every house had a solar exposure, and the middle was half a hectare, and they collected all their night soil and hired a master gardener in the half hectare to grow all the food for the 25 houses, and there's no piping, no sewage, no utilities, solar heat, solar passive gain, solariums, and a master gardener to keep it all running. That sounds pretty progressive to me.
The problem now is the pharmaceutical industry, because people are so sick, they eat too much, and it shouldn't go.
Yeah, well, the problem's not the pharmaceutical industry. The problem is that we have believed the lie that we could shortcut all this and still be okay. That's the problem.
I promise you I get back to this question. It'll be one of the last ones. It will be a nasty one. But there's another question over here.
Hi, my name is Jair Tanasale, and I work on his organic farm. And I have one question, because you have all these worms, very fertile soil, and you want as much grass as you can possibly get. Well, we have a lot of mole heaps, and I'm his mole trapper as well. I'm just wondering, how do you treat animals that are not really helpful?
Yes, yeah, not everything is positive, just like not every bacteria is positive, not every microbe is positive. Most of them are positive, but some of them are not. So how do you deal with those? All negatives are symptomatic of our management. So weeds, sickness, disease, viruses, all of that, in our opinion, that's not the problem itself. That is a symptom of something that's wrong in the system, in the protocol. In other words, when a cow gets sick on our farm, we don't immediately assume, oh, well, goodness, I just didn't use the right drug. We assume, what did we do that broke down the immunological terrain of that cow that allowed her to get sick? We think you'll learn a lot more assuming it's my fault than there's no fault at all. It just happened. You know, the bad fairies sprinkled, you know, pathogens or moles or fungi or whatever down. And so I don't have the specific answer to moles, except that I would imagine that if there were chickens or turkeys in the landscape, they probably would scratch those holes out and become, it would be inhospitable. For example, groundhogs. One of our big problems in our area is groundhogs. Okay, they're a burrowing mammal, yay big, and they make, you know, a burrow so big. Well, I remember as a child, we had groundhogs everywhere, and we were always, you know, dropping a hay wagon tire or losing a load of hay or, you know, whatever. And these big, I mean, they make a pretty big hole. And now we don't have any groundhogs. Why? It's because the disturbance is dramatic enough with the turkeys, the chickens, the cows, the management on the land, that it's become inhospitable for the ground. Now, the groundhogs are still out in the woods, you know, and you see them out in the field, but they don't burrow in the fields anymore. So I think that a lot of this is the kind of activity and management going across that it moves the ecology to a place that is something you can manage for. And it might be slow movement, okay? But over time, as we monitor, we're able to actually see what is what we want, and are we moving forward to it or away from it? And then we modify as we go along.
I guess the answer is you need to move beyond organic towards natural farming. That's what you're talking about. A question from the online side.
Yes. I try to combine these two questions, and I suggest you try to combine the answer. There is a question from an anonymous person and from Andreas Den Boer. The anonymous person is asking, how do you suggest making a start in transition from conventional farm to a perennial sustainable farm system? And Andreas Den Boer, he's asking, loving and hoping for small and democratic solutions is like saying, people will figure it out. What are, in your opinion, guiding principles?
Wow, okay. On the first question, I would simply say that everybody's situation, everybody's context developed over time. You know, where we are. I mean, name the issue, it didn't happen yesterday. You know, it percolated, it germinated, it grew to a point where now we suddenly see this issue and say, oh, that happened, okay? And so with that in mind, we can't change everything that needs to be changed overnight. And innovation is costly, because innovation is, by definition, untried. You know, the opposite of success is not failure. The opposite of success is giving up, because all successful people failed as much as unsuccessful people, except for the last time. Okay? And so, as my dad used to say, he said, if at first you don't succeed, just suck and suck and suck until you do suck a seed. And just stay with it. You know, a lot of reasons I think that we've been successful is not because we had any advantage over anybody, it's just we were too stubborn to quit. And so sometimes that's the truth. You know, the person who's successful is just the one that didn't give up in the early going. And so as a transition, I always encourage people to try something, a little thing, and make a trial. Even if it's half a hectare, if it's 5 chickens. You never had chickens? Well, get 5 chickens. At least grow some for your table. You've never had a compost pile? Start a garden. Have a compost pile on the edge of your garden. Play with it. Get a vermicomposting bin. You can get kits and put them under your kitchen sink. You know, you can throw out the gerbil and the cat and the dog and put in 2 chickens, you know, in your condominium. And they're great role models for teenagers. You know, chickens get up early, they work all day turning trash into treasure, and they go to bed as soon as the sun goes down. They don't caterwaul through the town at night, right? Great teenager role models. So just start something, anything. What we see is we have become, very collectively, we have become, in the West here especially, with all of our technology, we have become cultures, you and us, we've become cultures of technicians. And a technician tends to not want to start something until they know all the procedures will work at the end. You know, and I think computers have actually hurt us in this way. You know, you don't want to start something until you know exactly the whole sequence, and then you start the first one. And I think that our technology has made us more timid about being innovative onto a path that we don't know about yet, because we're so concerned that what if it messes up, you know, partway through? Well, life is messy, and it does mess up, and that's the story of innovation. And so don't bet the farm, do a little thing, start and fail, and start and fail, and get your feet wet. And what that will do is affirm a trajectory, and as your confidence builds, you'll go forward. I know a lady, for example, in Edmonton, wonderful story, met her, Edmonton, Canada, big city. She desperately wanted to farm. She had no money and no land. How can I get started farming? I have no money, no land, no family with land. But she had one acquaintance that had a backyard. She went to this friend and she said, could I put a garden in your backyard? I just want to grow something. And so her friend said, well, sure. So she put a 2 meter by 4 meter garden in the lady's backyard. Well, her neighbor saw it and said, that's a beautiful garden. Do you think your friend would put one in my backyard? Within 18 months, she was farming 15 backyards, had a part-time employee, and was a full-time farmer, and the name of the business is On Borrowed Ground.
But she put farmers out of business.
Yes. Every time I hear the most difficult sob story and I can't, then I hear a story like this and realize, you know what? Our weak link is always between our ears. Always.
Joel,
as my son Daniel says, he says, our problem is not resources, our problem is not money, our problem is even not knowing, our problem is constipation of imagination.
I agree. But you know the Dutch, and I told this story about Aal Derkhuizen. And actually he said something that is, well, he might be right. The Dutch are a country of technicians, of merchants, and I always say if Philips had invented the iPhone, it would have failed. So that is the farmers you're with here. They need to be imaginative.
Yes.
The bunch of you are the entrepreneurs that left Europe.
Yes.
Isn't that true? So what is your advice to the leftovers in Europe in order to become imaginative?
Oh, to the leftovers in Europe. Boy, that's a hard question.
We need some nasty questions as well. You know
we
that.
need some nasty questions. I come back to, people ask me, you got to realize in the U.S., I'm considered a total, weirdo, heretic. Look, I haven't given this lecture at Virginia Tech, okay, and that's an ag school, all right. So you got to go 1,000 miles away from home and go to a place that doesn't even speak your language before you're an expert, right? I would simply say, I simply answer that question saying, I don't feel like I'm that creative. I'm just a convictional contrarian enough that I'm looking at this frog saying, how do I duplicate that? And we've simply, our creativity has been an outgrowth of saying, here's what we know. Here's the template. How do we get to that point? And so if we have animals, well, animals move. They're not in confinement houses. They move. If they move, we've got to control them. We've got to shelter them. And we've got to get water to them. And so our 6 miles of water system that's all gravity fed, our portable shade mobiles, all of our systems are based on these very simple but elegant principles. And that's why I wanted to start this with that, because at the end of the day, we're not actually dairy farmers or beef farmers or sheep farmers or vineyardists. We're actually stewards of a piece of land that we have for a blink of time, and then we're moving on. Okay? That's the truth. I mean, somebody might say we own it, but we don't actually own it. Right? We're caretakers. We're caretakers of something bigger than us. And so the question is, how do we interact with that in favorable stewardship so that we leave it better than we found it? That's a fundamental question. And that means if the banks fail, so be it. That means if the political system collapses, so be it. That means if some of the big corporations fail, so be it. Are you with me? At the end of the day, our moniker on our little freezer bags is healing the planet, healing the land one bite at a time. And so we want to make our customers empowered to feel like their consumption decisions are partnering with us. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to feel like they're part of a solution and wants to have a sacred place. Everybody wants to do that. Very few people actually want to destroy anything. We destroy things just because, not because we want to, just because we didn't realize the result of our actions. And most people love to be empowered that I'm part of some grand, big, righteous thing.
And be able to buy it at a lower rate than at Whole Foods. I think that is brilliant.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's not forget that. Yeah. There was a question somewhere up there. We forgot about the gentleman, and perhaps the question is still relevant? Well, I figured out already. Okay. So there is room for another question from the hall. The lady over there. Oh dear, how to get there?
The microphone's coming.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Doetse de Jong and I'm a landscape architect. I have done my scripture about food foresters, and I was wondering what's your opinion about it.
Oh, edible landscaping. I am a total fan of edible landscaping. I mean, obviously, I didn't have time to show you all of our pictures, but we have mulberries, apples, pears, pawpaws, blackberries, plums. One of my joys is to be able to walk out the back door and always have something to graze on. The cows aren't the only grazers. I'm a grazer, and I love seasonal celebrations of the strawberries are in. Oh, the plums are in. The mulberries are in, and so yes, we are huge believers in incorporating a stackable permaculture faction, a tier of trees, pasture,
Thank you. Yeah.
all that, you know, mushrooms around the trees, all those, taking advantage of those microclimates. We even have a floating raft in the pond near the house. It's a PVC raft. 3.5 meters by 4 meters, and it floats. And we put dirt and compost on it, and we shove it out there. And the vegetables are bug free because no bugs can get there because the fish eat them on their way out to the floating garden, and the water acts as a heat sink. The plants grow way better because the ambient stays real, perfect. The roots can get as wet as they want. They can either stay up dry or they can go down. It makes a wonderful shade that makes a high oxygenation zone with snails and aquatic life dangling on the roots that attracts the salamanders and the fish to come up and nibble on the snails and things on the roots. And the sun is reflected off the water to the underneath the leaves, so the sunlight gets taken in both above the leaf and below the leaf.
Nice.
It's really cool.
Yes, I have another question. Did you visit the food forest in Leeuwarden?
No,
there is also a food forest.
No.
I think
It's me.
Okay. Very interesting to see.
Oh yes. Oh
no. I'm initiative of the Food Forest Leeuwarden, so you're welcome if you have time.
Oh,
but
yeah.
it just started, so no. My other question is...
I just have to come back for a month.
Yes, you're welcome.
Every place I go in the world, there's all this cool, interesting stuff. I try to see what I can, and
of course,
and my handlers can only handle so much.
Yeah, my name is Anastasia.
But there's a lot of neat, interesting stuff going on. I mean, like the guy in Kenya who took used 24-inch culverts, cut them 12 feet long, 4 meters roughly, and poked holes in the side, and packed them full of compost, drips water on top, and he grows broccoli in these upright vertical tubes, and he's growing 25 acres of broccoli on 1 acre.
Cool.
Very cool. Yes.
My name is Anastasia Limareva. I also was a student here, and I studied environmental technology. And yes, I also started to follow my path, as other students can do now, to study food forestry. And I'm very happy that you're here, because, cool, thanks. My question is about food forest and agroforestry systems. If I may, my dream for the future is to see landscapes, and not only in Friesland, but everywhere in the world, that are organized by this food forests, grazelands, cows, and other animals. So we have different styles of landscaping, and not only like now. But my question is how you see an example of the food forest that is 20, 30 years old. Would you let animals in, and how often? So practical question. Yeah, there is a lot of young food forests are planted right now, and most of them are for educational purposes, or just like my project too, as just to inspire people, hey, you can grow it in Friesland too, all of this kind of weird stuff, plants. But again, see in the future how many animals you would let per hectare, which animals and how often. So this is the question.
It's a great question. And there's a lot wrapped up in your question, from the food forest to the agroforestry to these are actually in the academic world, they're fairly technical terms, and they've been defined fairly narrowly. So when you just move seamlessly from food forest to agroforestry, I'm not trying to demonize the question. I'm just saying that there's more there than just a simple question. So let me answer a couple of things. One is the food. If we look at the food forest, I think if there's one weakness that I've seen in food forests around the world, it's that they don't incorporate animals in them as much as they should. And I think the ideal animal in a food forest is poultry. Now, all poultry has very different principles. And so, if we could just take, and this is a beautiful thing, I'm not trying to belabor it, I'm trying to encourage your imagination, all right? So, a duck, waterfowl, does not scratch. So, if you have things that are on the ground or close enough to be scratched, then you don't want a chicken that will scratch it out, all right? So a duck will eat insects. Indian runner ducks are supposedly the best kind. And then they will lay eggs as well, and of course make meat. But the beauty is they don't scratch. A turkey scratches very little. A turkey is between a duck and a chicken. They scratch a little, but not very much. So the beauty of a turkey is where a duck will almost live off of, a duck is almost an herbivore. They will live 80% off of forage. A turkey will only live 40% off of forage, and a chicken only 15%. So depending on your vegetation, are you going for vegetation or bug control, and what plants are susceptible to what activity? So this gets pretty exciting. One of the most exciting garden incorporation with animals I ever saw was in upstate New York. A family was raising half a hectare of asparagus commercially. Now that's a lot of asparagus. Half a hectare, it was over an acre of asparagus. Well, asparagus as a perennial is notoriously difficult to weed, right? Because you can't till it because it's a perennial. You till it out. And so in the industry, of course, they spray an herbicide. The herbicide kills the weeds, and then you have your asparagus. But what these guys did, and you don't want to put chickens in there because chickens would scratch out the crowns and kill the asparagus. So what these guys did, they started a group of turkeys in the spring. So the turkey poults are young. The asparagus plants are growing. They're cutting them, all right? So about the time you let the asparagus go, it starts getting warm. Now the turkeys are, 4 or 5 weeks old. And so they used this netting material to encircle the asparagus patch, put in the turkeys. And so as the asparagus was let grow and it went into fronds, as it grew with the turkeys, so that by Thanksgiving, when the turkeys were great big and ready to sell, the asparagus was up here like this, and the turkeys didn't like it because it was so tough. So the asparagus was able to go through its canopy of phenotypical, its physiological expression. The turkeys were underneath it, and as the turkeys grew, they ate more and more weeds aggressively, so that by the end of the season, it was a completely weedless, perfect asparagus patch. In the winter, they took off the asparagus. In the spring, they started the cycle back over again. And it completely changed the economics of the asparagus, because now they were able to have chemical-free asparagus with turkeys, and they had turkey meat to sell. So it was a wonderful symbiotic arrangement. So all of these things are they're very intricate, and that's why all of this experimentation is so important. As far as agroforestry is concerned, we have elected, and this might get me sideways of you, so don't throw anything. We have elected not to put trees through our grazing fields because anyone who mows hay or handles equipment, the more trees in your field, it's way more inefficient, and you get all these wet spots and dry. How do you dry forage if you've got trees all scattered around? So we have elected for portable shade mobiles, which actually allow us to more strategically place the manure exactly where we want it. The problem with trees is if they're always shade spots, they become a campsite for the cows, and you're translocating the manure from here and always putting it under the tree, then it gets too much and it goes into the groundwater and we lose that manure. So we have opted to go with a portable shade structure as opposed to trees in the field, not only for efficiency of mechanical, forage harvesting, but also for efficiency of being able to determine exactly where the manure and where the impaction is going to be on that particular stay.
Reinvent nature. That's the basic answer. So, to you, who are you?
My name is Arjan Wijnstra. I'm a small organic farmer in Vorden in the east of our country with cows, pigs and chickens. I'm thinking over having all my cows calves in spring, but anyone I talk about that says, well, you maybe can do that and some other farmers, but if anyone is going to do that, there's going to be a big problem because people want to have milk all over the year, 12 months. What's your idea about that?
Yeah, my idea about the unseasonal production is that two things. Number one, you never have to answer the question, what if everybody does this? That's a very disempowering question because everybody's not going to do it. And what you have to answer the question is, what do I have to do to live to fight another day? I mean, at the end of the day, I've got to stay in business. Now, that doesn't mean that I run roughshod over this. What it means, though, is I don't have to answer the question, what if everybody does this? The fact is that if it builds soil for me and it works for me, and if it makes a place where more family can be employed and more people can come back to the farm and we can minister to more people in the city, I'm going to do it. Now, that sounds like a very selfish answer that, like, I don't worry about other people. But there's this tension, isn't there, between community and individuality, all right? And ultimately, I'm not going to allow my trajectory to be managed by what somebody else fears in case everybody does it. Now, with that in mind, what if everybody did do it? Well, what if everybody did do it? It would do a couple things. One is there would be a place, there would be a point at which the price for the non-seasonal would go so high that somebody would do it. And so I'll give you one example of that right now for us. So we have beef cattle. Now, we would love to harvest all of our beef within like a 4-month window, when it's just perfect, okay? But one of our problems is our customers want beef all the time, and the slaughterhouse that we use, that we actually own a 42% interest in, needs to keep its workforce employed because we have government regulations that don't allow the abattoir, the slaughterhouse, to actually be seasonal either. And then you have employment requirements that make it difficult for people to work seasonally in different jobs. So you have all this context stuff. The bottom line is we have elected to go every 2 weeks of the year and not just the 4 months, i.e. not be seasonal, in order to maintain this whole relational context that we're in that we can't change overnight. In our ideal world, we do them all in 4 months, but we don't live in an ideal world. And so we make those compromises. Now, that compromise means that we have to make enough hay so that if we have a drought, we don't have to sell off our herd, which means we have to inventory more hay than we would need to with our management style. And so we tack that on as part of the price for our beef is not being seasonal. Okay? So did I just be a hypocrite? Well, I hope not. We try to do as much as we can, and we run our calving, and we do everything we possibly can to be seasonal, but don't make your business model fail to be an altruistic purist.
Let's stop on this one.
Yeah.
Because we can go on for hours and hours. Joel, thank you very much for
okay, so I'm the blessings man, okay? So I always give a blessing. Now may all of your carrots grow long and straight. May your radishes be large but not pithy. May tomato blossom end rot affect your Monsanto neighbor's tomatoes, not yours. May the foxes be struck blind. You have foxes here? May the foxes be struck blind at your pastured chickens. Where are they? May all of your culinary experiments be delectably palatable. May the rain fall gently on your fields, the wind to be always at your back. Your children rise and call you blessed, and may we all make our nest a better place than we inherited. Thank you. God bless you all. Thank you.
Hallelujah. Thank you very much.